And so it is my honor to get to introduce my dear friend and Young Living Platinum, Liz James. Not only is she, as you might have read in the bio there, she's a 30-year practicing pharmacist. She's also a very dedicated and incredible researcher. She's an amazing yoga instructor. She runs a farm. She's a great wife, a great friend, a great leader who pours herself daily into everyone. But she is also the best prepper I know in every good meaning of that word. Learning what we need to have in our homes for great immune support, being ready for anything is her specialty, I tell you. So there's no one that I would recommend to hire for this call right here than my favorite pharmacist. That would be FARM assist, who loves sharing about all these things, as well as teaching us how to use our unmatched Young Living products. She does all the research, like I said, but thankfully she won't surely teach a full chemistry OChem class or biology class tonight. One thing that she is truly gifted at is bringing it to the rest of us to understand. So thank you for being here, Liz, tonight, especially on such a busy week. And we're just so honored to have you here teaching us tonight. So thank you. Hugs from 10 miles away. And the floor is yours, friend.
Thank you guys so much. Can you hear me okay, first of all? All right. It is a pleasure to be here today. And I hope that what I share tonight is heard and felt, and just all of the things, because the 30-year journey it took to get here, it's kind of emotional for me too, because you know, when you shed a cocoon, it's a little scary coming out of the cocoon, you know, the first time, because your wings are all tight and you feel like you're not quite protected. So I just kind of wanted to start with my personal story, like, because people who don't know me, the first thing they ask is like, how did you end up, you know, being all gung-ho Young Living and being a pharmacist? Because that seems very strange. And really my personal health journey was no different than anybody else's, except for, you know, maybe you caught on early on in life that you shouldn't eat all the crappy food in college and do all the things, but when you're on a budget, you eat what you have and all of that. So, you know, I blew my stomach out in college with coffee, and I ate a lot of potatoes and not enough of everything else, and lived on a very strict budget, and made it through. I went to A&M and graduated from Texas A&M, and then went to UT and graduated from UT, both in pharmacy school. So I was in school for quite a while, and not eating the best for quite a while too. And about 10 years after I had graduated from pharmacy school, and we were living on our farm, and I had a very kind of it wasn't a major accident. It was just, I tripped over a wheelbarrow and I cracked my wrist. And so that was my first big bone I had ever broken. And the doctor had me do a bone density test. And at that time, when I was about 33 years old, I was diagnosed with osteopenia, which is a precursor to osteoporosis. And at 33, that's pretty young to get that diagnosis, but I'm pretty fine boned. And the doctors were like, you're gonna need to be on some medication. And that wasn't something that I was interested in. And I had two different people at two different times, and who did not know each other, tell me while my arm was in a cast, you really need to look at drinking raw milk. And I was like, but it's so dangerous, you know, because that's what we had learned in school. That's what I learned at A&M. That's what it's just the things that you learn, right? But two people had told me, and that was, I believe that that's the Holy Spirit. Whenever you have whenever you have a repetitive thing that comes into your life. And so I started studying raw milk, and raw milk is not what we think it is. And the reason for that, the reason that we don't think it is because of the information that has been fed to us over the years. And just because we've been told something for a very long time doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. It's just what we've been told. And so it becomes part of what we believe. And after probably about 100 hours of studying, I came to the conclusion that we were drinking raw milk and we were never drinking anything else ever again. But at the same time, I was like, okay, the American Dairy Association has not been exactly reliable information in our life. Who else has not been taking care of us in terms of information? And of course, I went on and started exploring the food industry and found a ton of information in the food industry, which opened your eyes even more. So now I'm sitting here like, oh my gosh, I'm pointing fingers at all the things, but the 3 fingers were pointing back at me, because I was the pharmacist, and I was like, what's the next thing I'm going to have to dive into? And that thing that I was going to have to dive into was really looking into big pharma and what did that look like. And it's emotional for me because you put that much time and energy into something, you can't just hop out of it immediately because you got bills to pay. And so I get it, because I know there may be other people on this call who have found flaw in the industry that they may be working in, but they feel trapped. And so I do understand where you are. So for 20 years, I just educated myself behind the scenes. I started learning all the things. I live in a smaller community, and I made really good friends with other pharmacists and technicians and patients that if I felt like I could, there were times when I'd say, can you call me at home and let's talk about what you're about to take off the clock so that I can be honest with you, because there's things that we can't necessarily say at work. Okay. So, so I'm just going to go over for about 20 minutes here. I'm going to talk to you about some of the things that I learned as I was uncovering myself in the last 20 years and how that plays out and what that ultimately looked like. So, and by the way, osteopenia was not my only problem. I mean, I grew up with endometriosis. I had interstitial cystitis. I've managed to get that under control holistically. At the time that I had osteopenia, I had high cholesterol too. And all of these things I've been able to manage holistically. So there are definitely ways, but it's definitely harder to backwalk out of something that you already have. So it's better to keep your genes turned off than to allow them to be turned on. Hang on. So 86% of healthcare dollars are spent on chronic conditions. And these chronic conditions are generally not microbe causing illnesses, meaning they're man-made illnesses. They're not something that we stumbled onto a bacteria and we became sick this way. And 7 out of every 10 deaths in the United States are from non-communicable diseases, meaning, again, people are dying from man-made diseases. And what that really means is 7 out of every 10 deaths are, quite frankly, preventable. So with diet and watching your toxin load and all of the other things too. So I see some people who are my age or older. I'm in my 50s, and you'll recall that there's not, if you go into a nursing home, or if you go and visit with older people who are in their 80s, you will not find autoimmune disorders in that population. You might find other things, but you don't tend to find the autoimmune disorders that you find in the younger generation. And when I started as a pharmacist in 91, we didn't really see a lot of autoimmune disorders. That really hadn't clicked yet. I mean, it hadn't become a thing yet. But currently, as in the last 20 or so years, we now have 1 in 2 kids and millennials have chronic health conditions. 1 in 6 kids has a developmental disability. 1 in 9 has ADHD or a developmental disability. 1 in 11 has asthma. 1 in 13 has a severe food allergy, meaning like they need an EpiPen. And 1 in 36 has autism. And, you know, again, going back to my age, we did not have kids with autism in our schools. They just weren't there. And unfortunately, having spent 30 years in pharmacy, you know, big pharma and big insurance are in bed together, and big agri, or the food companies or the processed food companies, have actually made the bed for big pharma and big insurance together. And there's just no denying that has actually happened. And unfortunately, when you have that kind of a relationship, you know, it's almost to the point where it's almost like an abusive relationship, because you start to lose trust in these big industries, right? And unfortunately, the big pharma has some liability, but the vaccine manufacturers, any vaccine that is on a childhood schedule, they have zero liability. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I wouldn't buy a car from a company that wouldn't have to take any responsibility for a car that might be a lemon, you know, or whatever. So that was just something else that I kind of tucked in my hat. And I eventually did a ton of research on vaccines and found some really interesting and disturbing information on vaccines in general. And also, there is the drug company itself has an incredibly long, in both civil and criminal penalties. They have a rap sheet, and it's pretty much every single big pharma drug company in the United States. Right now, the total since the year 2000, they have paid out $71 billion in civil and criminal penalties. And, you know, the penalties range anywhere from fraud, corruption. You know, this doesn't even include personal injury and damages. This is just civil and criminal penalties. So whenever you hear something about the, you know, well, why should we trust supplements? I'm saying, why should we trust big pharma? I mean, honestly, we have to think about that. So, but it's a really interesting thing, because in 1910, there was something that was written by a gentleman by the name of Abraham Flexner, which is called the Flexner Report. And I don't know if you've ever heard of that or not, but I'm just going to speak about it really, really simply, if I can, because in order to understand the times, you have to understand the history. And if that's one thing that I've learned, is like I said, if you've been told something, just because you've been told something over and over again, doesn't mean that there's not two sides to the story. And Abraham Flexner wrote a report that was funded by Rockefeller and Carnegie, some very big people. And what happened then is essentially that a lot of, everything was shut down except for big pharma directed medicine. That's what happened. Meanwhile, there was another doctor, well, and Flexner was not even a doctor. He was an educator, but there was a doctor by the name of William Osler who organized clinical instruction at the bedside of the patient. And he was very adamant about saying it's more important to know what sort of patient has a disease rather than what sort of disease a patient has. And if you think about that, he's talking about the patient can tell you, if you sit and talk to them long enough, probably what their condition is. And Osler wanted to keep humanity in medicine, but Flexner was really more interested in making it scientific and diagnostic from a laboratory sense, and not so much from a spending time and actually seeing and watching the patient. And so that's one thing that happened, but it shut down all home remedies. It shut down chiropractic care, is shut down everything. And it has taken decades to get us back to where we are now. And we're still not back where we need to be. But because it was they just shut everything down. The other thing that was going on in the late 1800s and early 1900s was learning the difference between germ and terrain theory and what went on there. And if you, we unfortunately have subscribed to germ theory in that, if you're exposed to something, you're going to get sick. And, one germ for every disease, that kind of thing. And that is entirely not true. Louis Pasteur was he says he was the founder, or we say he was the founder of the germ theory, but the germ theory actually started in the 1700s. But there was another guy named Antoine Beauchamp, and I'm probably butchering that name because it's French. But he differed from Louis Pasteur in that he believed that it had more to do with what the body was doing. He felt like there was an important value in the pH of the body, which we now know is very true, and how the nature of the organisms change depending on the pH that the body is. And ultimately, that the ecosystem that is our body is the very most important thing in determining whether or not somebody is going to be ill. Now, we know for a fact now that that's true, that the healthier you are, your ecosystem, your genetics, your everything is so dependent upon how you treat your body. And if you punish your body or abuse your body in many, many ways, and we'll talk more about that later, the more that is affected, the more likely you are to have diseases and disorder. So again, we hear all about Louis Pasteur, who quite frankly was a plagiarist and attempted to steal information from Antoine Beauchamp. And he was also politically connected with Napoleon and some other high politic people. And so once again, those with the money and the connections make the rules. And Pasteur, his germ theory won out. So you see are you starting to see a trend here where we've got our history is not quite exactly the way that we thought that they were. So key factors of a healthy terrain include alkalinity of the body, adequate nutrition, what is the toxin load, the emotions and the healthy mental state of the individual. And it's important that the body have a certain negative electrical charge, and that the cells have a certain negative electrical charge. And I won't go too much into that, but there's a lot of really interesting information regarding that charge and how important it is. So things that can compromise the terrain are the toxin load, which can be physical, chemical, biological, or emotional stressors. That includes lifestyle choices of inactivity, poor food choices, which would include processed foods, refined grain, and excess sugar intake, chronic sleep deprivation. Other lifestyle choices are choosing to accept, and I know that there are reasons that people need to be on medication. I mean, I've been on medication at times in my life too, but agreeing to take a medicine when there is a lifestyle choice that could be corrected so that the medication is avoided is the best place to go. And according to the CDC, nearly half of the United States adult population is on one or more medications, a quarter are on 3 or more, and 1 in 8 are on 5 or more medications. And medication by definition is a toxin to the body. It does affect it can affect your vitamins, your minerals, your hormones, your enzyme activity in the body, and it is toxic. It may be helping in one way, but it is assuredly hurting in another way. And there are groups of medications that actually degrade the immune system beyond just having its own toxic component. And that would include immunosuppressants, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, Tylenol, antidepressants. When I say Tylenol, acetaminophen, antibiotics, nanomedicine, nanoparticles, and vaccines that contain adjuvants. The adjuvants are extraordinarily toxic, and even anesthesia. Okay. Other things that can cause a toxin load is underlying conditions related to mold exposure, which that is a big problem, and a lot of people they stay in a situation very unaware that there is a mold situation, and the doctors do not address it the way they should. Household, occupational, and environmental toxin exposure. Surely we all know by now the endocrine disrupting chemicals that are found in air fresheners, body care products. All of these things are so dangerous. Microplastics, those microplastic beads that are in some toothpaste now and other body care products. They call them little scrubbing beads. Heavy metals that is found in common like makeup and vaccines, pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides, air pollution. The worst air pollution is typically indoors, more so than outdoors. So at home, you have full control of the air pollution that might be in your house. Psychological and emotional factors would include chronic stress, social isolation, stressful life events, childhood adversity, childhood adversity, if it is not dealt with emotionally, at some point in the life, it will eventually cause major stressors to the body. And if y'all have never sat and listened to Jen Weir talk or gone through any of her programs, I highly recommend her as a resource if you need some help walking through that. And the other thing is, and this is something I don't have a lot of time to address today, but scars are there. It has to do with the charge on cells and the way the body works, but especially scars across the midline can be very stressful to the body in terms of affecting the immune system and other systems in the body. So the other thing is, if you look at virology, because we're talking kind of about what happened in 2020 and 2021. If you look at virology but refuse to look at toxicology, then you've got an incomplete picture. And again, this is another aspect of the germ versus terrain theory. So you've got to decrease the toxin load in order to make your body a healthier place. right? And when you start to learn about vaccines, because that's one of, after I started learning about some of the horrendous side effects that of some very common medications that we dispense in pharmacy, like the true side effects, and you know, I'll throw one of them out there, like statins. You know, so many people are on statins, and they're so detrimental to the body. And I asked people, I was like, would you take a medication that knowingly had a high likelihood of causing dementia? And of course, nobody would take something like that if that was the case, if that's what statins can do. All right. But anyway, when we're learning about vaccines, and when I was learning about vaccines in pharmacy school, it was a I thought we learned a lot, but the reality is we didn't learn that much, and we continue to not learn that much even after we got out of school. So what I'm going to call today is we're going to get vaccinated. So we're going to vaccinate ourselves, and we're going to get fact. We're going to go with facts. And I'm going to start by saying, crazily enough, would you ever imagine that there could be benefits to having certain childhood diseases? Would you ever think that? So some viruses actually offer beneficial effects. They help regulate the gut microbiota, which we know is very important, right? And they also can protect against non-infectious diseases later on in life. Viruses prime, maintain, and strengthen optimal immune response. Now, for example, chickenpox. You drop something in the comments if you had chickenpox when you were growing up. Drop me 2 things if you went to a chickenpox party and actually got chickenpox from a chickenpox party. So, because that's what happened in my house. We had a chickenpox party. And so chickenpox actually lowers the risk of brain cancer. Once you've had chickenpox, it lowers the risk of having brain cancer. Now, I don't know about you, but I would rather have chickenpox than have an increased risk of brain cancer, right? I don't know. That's me. So how about measles? If you're older, I actually had measles when I was growing up. And there's probably fewer of us out here who had measles. Yep. Okay. So having measles actually reduces the risk of heart disease, arthritis, and allergies. Right? So, is there things to think about? Children who receive the pertussis vaccination are more susceptible to pertussis throughout their lifetime, 5 years after completing the childhood series. Okay. And flu shots make people more susceptible to other more severe respiratory viruses. Now, this is the wild type influenza, not the vaccine influenza, right? Okay. So in our bodies, we have 2 main types of immune system. We have cell-mediated immunity, and we have humoral immune response. The cell-mediated, and I've got to get a little technical here, so you guys bear with me. We won't stay technical for very long, I promise. Cell-mediated is the activity of the white blood cells, and it sends like when something happens, your white blood cell army goes to the point of invasion by a foreign entity, whatever that is, a virus, a fungus, a bacteria, whatever, or a toxin like aluminum or mercury, and it attacks and then excretes a waste of what it has attacked. So that waste now looks like mucus or a rash or a cough, something respiratory. You got me? Okay. So with the humoral, and let me back up. For somebody who has a suppressed immune system, if their immune system cannot do that, cannot make those little packages that it's trying to push out through cough, mucus and coughing or diarrhea or whatever it is, they can actually die with no symptoms, or get really sick and have no symptoms, because their cell mediated immunity can't mount the response. Okay. The humoral immune system, this is where we're more dealing with vaccines. The antibodies attach themselves to the proteins on the invader and either destroy them or mark them for destruction. And our antibodies form that are unique to the pathogen to prevent a full-on invasion in the future of the exact same pathogen. Okay. But our goal needs to be to support the cell-mediated immunity, and so that we can actually fight things off. Because if we can't fight things off, it can become very difficult to stay well and healthy, right? And the more the body is already filled with toxins and trash by what we're eating or what we're exposing ourselves to, and all of that, the mold, whatever it is, all of that trash, the body's already trying to work on that trash to get it out too. But the greater the likelihood of a severe cell-mediated immune response, like total mucus or just days and days and days of diarrhea, right? So, but vaccine-initiated immunity is different because it wanes over time, and you can't bypass the cell-mediated immunity and expect the same result. So that's just something to think about. And there is a doctor that I follow. His name is Dr. Tom Cowan. And he has this saying, and this kind of puts everything into perspective. So if you think about a splinter, if a body gets a splinter, if the pus that starts happening around that splinter is there for a reason, because it's trying to push the splinter out, right? The body's trying to push the splinter out. But if you take an antibiotic and it does away with the pus, the splinter is still there, right? The problem is still there. And that's what happens a lot of times when we are taking antibiotics or whatever it is we're doing. We're not addressing the problem. We're dealing with the symptom at hand, and we're trying to fix the symptom at hand. We have to fix the root of the problem. So that's just something to think about. We have to learn to exist with viruses, because there's like 1.8 million of them out there, and I'm not exaggerating on that number. And they're not going to come up with 1.8 million vaccines, although they might try, because it'd be a very lucrative business, and they probably are going to try to get as many as they can. So we have to learn to live with viruses in one form or fashion, because they're never going to go away. This is part of who we are. Now, Mary Young said, people who are looking for truth will recognize it when they see it. And as I was going through all of my history and learning everything, that's what happened to me. I saw it. I saw it, and I couldn't unsee it as I was learning all of this. And in September of last year, I chose to quit my job, because it was I felt like at that point in time that I would be violating the Hippocratic Oath, and I would be violating my personal integrity. And I understand everybody has their own journey in this, but that's where I arrived at that point in my life. So now I work full time to help people just find their way. So what is in my personal toolkit on our farm for this season? And the most important things, if you haven't guessed already, they're not entirely things. A healthy diet of nutrient-dense food. And if you want to know exactly what nutrient-dense food is, I would suggest following the Weston A. Price organization. That's WESTON A. Price. Find them and follow them. They are an excellent resource. And there is a cookbook called Nourishing Traditions by Sally Fallon. That is not just a cookbook, it's an enormous resource of how to have good, healthy food. There's staying away from refined sugar. Remember that we just entered into sugar season, and there's a reason that people get sick in the wintertime. It's not because it's all of a sudden got cold, it's because we're surrounded by sugar wherever we go, and then which causes tremendous inflammation. Staying well hydrated. When you get dehydrated, your blood becomes sluggish, which lowers your oxygen carrying capacity, and it sets up a more providential terrain for blood clotting. So that's something to think about too. And use your support tools. If you're not sure if you're getting the right nutrition, we have our master formula, we have our Ninja Red, we have these things that we can support ourselves with. We need to sleep well, and we have tools for that. I know that we have classes available on how to sleep better. If you're not sleeping well, you need to find out what your trigger is for why you're not sleeping well. And we have lots and lots of information out there on that. At our house, we use Tranquil, Rutavala, ImmuPro, Sleep Essence. You also want to learn to manage your emotions and get to know your emotional oils. Every oil works differently emotionally for people. And in our family, in our world, we use Stress Away, Peace and Calming. I love Luscious Lemon. And Tranquil is another one that I really like, the impact of fear and anxiety on the immune system has very severe health consequences over time. It's equivalent to smoking 5 cigarettes a day. All right. So I'll just say this. God is merciful and full of grace, and he will not leave us or forsake us, but we have to have full faith in him. And there are 366 passages with do not fear in the Bible, one for every day of the year and a bonus one just in case, right? So put your faith in him and consider surrounding yourself with people who walk in faith, not fear. Don't surround yourself with people who live in fear. Fear and faith are both contagious, and you want to choose wisely which one you're going to catch. All right. So keep your raindrop oils on hand and use those if you need them. Yeah, and get to know how to use them. I mean, we have in the kit, there is an actual diagram, but even if you don't even know how to use them, just get the oils and start putting them on the bottoms of your feet. Or put them on the bottom of your husband's feet or your kids' feet. And they're very, very important. We did an event last month. It's called Guns and Poses, and we do it every year. And one of the things that we were talking about is self-defense with intruders. And so we're just going to talk about the elephant in the room, right? Our 2020-2021 personal health intruder. All right. Okay. So with your personal health intruder, we have something called the Castle Doctrine. Now, if you're into history at all, you'll understand the Castle Doctrine is related to our Constitution, and right? We just talked about last night, Terry. So your Castle Doctrine is you can protect your house. Your house is your body. And It's my house, my rules, and you can use whatever you want to use on your own body. Here's a list of what we've chosen to keep in our home and why. So thieves and inner defense. We keep a well-stocked shelf of Super C chewables. I prefer the chewables because of the bioflavonoid-based vitamin C. There is a group of doctors called the FLCCC doctors. Are you familiar with that group? They recommend right now 500 to 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C a day. ImmuPro is another one that we have a lot of. They contain 4.2 milligrams of melatonin, as well as a hearty serving of an immune supportive mushroom blend. And I'm going to defer back again to the FLCC doctors. They wrote on their website, melatonin has anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, immunomodulating, and metabolic effects that are likely important in the mitigation of blank. I'll let you fill in the blank. Okay. Life 9, everyone should have probiotics as part of their daily routine always, whether it comes from a food or supplement source. That is one of the problems that we have in our society. Every people group in decades gone by ate fermented foods and ate quite a bit of it. And we don't do that anymore. I mean, we have to seek it out, and it needs to be wide varieties too. So, you know, learn to like your sauerkraut, your kefir, your kimchi, your kombucha, you know, your yogurt, your just there's a lot of different ways to get fermented food in your diet. The caveat to that would be if you know you have an active SIBO infection, which is a small intestine bacterial overgrowth. If you know that you have that, then you have to be a little more careful with eating fermented foods. Okay, the next set I'm going to do is a set of 3. This is what we have in our arsenal. We have neem capsules, NEEM. We have ivermectin, and we have quercetin. And we keep all 3 of those on hand. And I will let you do a little research on all 3 of those, but we keep all 3 of those on hand. And there's a doctor that referred to all 3 of those as, if you have a gun and you are shooting different size bullets and your bullets are zinc, those 3 are the gun that shoots the zinc into the cells. And zinc in the cells is very important. Okay. Zinc is really interesting because it is 25% of the population is deficient in zinc, and it is the 5th leading life-threatening factor, being zinc deficient. So interestingly, symptoms of zinc deficiency are impaired taste and smell, can be fever, cough, sore throat, general weakness, pain and achy limbs, runny nose, and diarrhea. Zinc deficiency. That sounds like something else. Yeah. So zinc really needs to get into our cells somehow. And it's got to have the gun in order to get into the cells efficiently. All right. The recommended daily dosage of zinc is 20 to 40 milligrams a day, according to many functional medicine doctors who believe as I do. And if you're not sure if you're getting 20 to 40 milligrams a day, zinc can be found in pumpkin seeds, grass-fed dairy butter, cashews, almonds, spinach, asparagus, dark chocolate, grass-fed meat, salmon, mushrooms, turkey. Now, in our Young Living products, we have Young Living, the Ninja Wolf berries. There's 1.8 milligrams per 100 grams of the Ninja Wolf berries, the dried wolf berries. There is 5 milligrams of zinc in ImmuPro, 3 milligrams in 2 tablets of Super B, 5 milligrams in Power Gize, 4 milligrams in Balance Complete, 2.1 milligrams in Amino Wise, 15 milligrams in Master Formula, 1 milligram in Mega Cal, and 1.1 milligram in Mighty Vites. So you may be getting enough zinc depending on what your supplement load is. But you need to go back and kind of add your zinc load up. You can get too much zinc if you go way overboard. And I do recommend lab work if if that's something that you're concerned about getting too much of. Don't need to be taking more than, if you're healthy, you don't need to be taking probably more than 50 milligrams a day total. The other thing is vitamin D3, K2, or D3 and K2. They play a supportive role in recovery and in prevention. And again, vitamin D is something that you'll want to kind of watch with lab work. The doctors who believe as I do say to keep your vitamin D levels at between 70 and 90. I do a lot of lab work reading with my consulting, and I see an enormous amount of people with very, very low D. So we have a big problem with vitamin D levels in the United States, unfortunately. And Super D, the Young Living Super D is fine for some people, but other people just need more, and it will not be cost effective to go and take as many tablets as they need. But again, you don't know unless you have lab work. So again, Super D is really good though for the little people too, because it's easy to regulate dosing. K2 is found, and why do we want K2? So K2 improves the bioavailability of D3 in the body, and it also plays an important role in lung function because it helps activate elastin, which is the protein responsible for lung tissue flexibility. And if K2 is lacking, then lung tissue becomes stiff and fibrous, and which makes breathing and intaking oxygen more difficult. So the K2 is really important as well. I'm also a fan of making sure that you're getting A and E. And again, if you're taking Master Formula, and probably Illuminize and some other supplements we have, then you'll be just fine. But K2 is found in Master Formula at 50 micrograms, Super Cal Plus at 30 micrograms, and Cardio Gize at 100 micrograms. So you might be getting all the K2 you need in the supplements that you have. So the other thing is N-acetylcysteine, or NAC, and that's not a Young Living product. It has some very interesting properties. It does appear to suppress the replication of that thing, and if it's used in a timely manner. So, it's also a precursor for making glutathione in the body, which sulfurzyme is also a precursor for making glutathione in the body, and we want all the glutathione we can get right now. So that's something to think about too. Oils and herbs that I have chosen to keep on hand, and I will leave the research up to you, are cinnamon. Remember that we have a lot of blends. And so cinnamon, I mean, this is a great time of the year for cinnamon. It's in Thieves, it's in Christmas Spirit, it's in Gathering, it's in Highest Potential. It's in all things Thieves, everywhere Thieves. Turmeric is another one that we've chosen to keep on hand, the golden turmeric. Turmeric is also in Agiles. Ginger is found, if you don't have any that's solo, check your blends. It's in Digize, Abundance, Allerzyme, and Essential Zyme 4, which are your digestive enzymes. Basil, pine, geranium is another one. And again, geranium is probably in 50 products. It's in a lot of products. Lemon, again, lemon is in a lot of products. Raven, RC, copaiba, frankincense, all these things. Let's see what else. I make my own nasal spray recipe that has lavender, frankincense, copaiba, and tea tree in it. And I've been adding just a drop or two of geranium to that. That nasal spray recipe is just 2 to 3 drops of each one of those oils, and then some sea salt, not table salt, but the either Himalayan salt or Dead Sea salt, something like that. And then filtered or distilled water in one of those nasal spray bottles. And I have I'm going to call it my DIY no intruder mouthwash recipe. And this recipe actually came from my aunt, who is in her 80s, and bless her heart, she had that thing when she was, well, she's 83, 82. Anyway, she had that thing, and she had it for 5 days, and she's also an asthmatic. She made it through just fine. And she said, well, I used the mouthwash, but I added vodka to it. And we started talking, and I was like, why did you add vodka to it? And she said, well, here's the thing. My aunt's pretty smart. She, when at the beginning of 2020, was it the beginning of 2020, when everything was going on, what happened when everybody ran out of hand sanitizer? They went to the vodka companies and they started making hand sanitizer with vodka. Now we can't do anything with the alcohol that comes in hand sanitizer, unless it's made from vodka. And then you can make a throat spray or a throat gargle with vodka, right? So because we know that alcohol kills on contact, vodka is, and I'm not telling you to gargle and drink, I'm telling you to gargle and spit for clarification here, but make a 50-50 blend of your Thieves mouthwash and vodka or whiskey or whatever hard liquor you want, and gargle often. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Other things to watch out for. I've got like 3 more minutes. Watch your 5G EMF load. That's a class all on its own, but we really need to watch the electromagnetic frequency load. It's very important. Other things to keep on hand: a pulse oximeter. It's just a little thing that fits on the finger. It costs about $25. Every home should have one, no matter what. A blood pressure cuff. Every home should have one, especially as we're moving towards telemed. You need to be able to have these things at home. We keep something at home called Boost. It is not. I'm not talking about Boost the drink. I'm talking about Boost. It's oxygen in a can. You can get it at a. It's not medical grade oxygen, but it's oxygen you can use if you're climbing a mountain and you need oxygen. You can find it at sporting goods stores. Okay. If you're not feeling well, you need to move. You need to move every couple of hours, whether you feel like it or not. You need to move, rotate, walk, do all the things. They do recommend, if you're not feeling well, to get on an aspirin. The doctors that I follow recommend nattokinase instead of aspirin. So that's something to think about keeping on hand as well. And then the last thing that you might want to keep on hand is a nebulizer. And there's reasons for that too. So anyway, that is it. I'm sorry. I'm sure that there were probably questions and things, but I can't watch the comments and talk at the same time because I was trying to blow through that as fast as possible.